Welcome back to Educating New Mexico. My name is Bonnie Murphy. We're continuing our series. It's about parent involvement in schools on a very different level than most of the discussion has been about. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, so we're here because partly we want to talk about the different things that are happening in schools, in education, that are making situations for kids struggling and really struggling. And your child actually is brilliant. In fact, he's gifted, but he also has some other diagnoses. So you want to tell me about that?
Our son was enrolled in
the traditional public school
public school district, yes. And he was struggling really bad. It was a constant, this was in kindergarten. And we were in constant communication with the school. They were telling us, he was exhibiting certain behaviors, aggression, things like that. He would have wild temper tantrums that were out of the norm for whatever the precipitating event would have been. And so we, on our own, because the school wouldn't help, started sending him to a play therapist.
Wait, I'm sorry, I have to back up. So did he have an IEP already? Okay, so your child was having struggles at the school and you were getting called frequently?
They were telling us he was going to be suspended. It was a litany. I mean, literally every single day they were calling about some issue with his behavior or refusing to do his work or, you name it. It was really almost a phone call every day. And so
you guys never went into the SAT process?
No.
Student assistance team?
We asked. We called.
Okay, so you already knew about the SAT?
I did.
Okay, and so then you asked them and then...
So we called and nobody would respond, nobody would do anything, and was continually getting worse. And so we had to figure out what was causing whatever was going on for him. So we put him into therapy with a play therapist and cognitive behavioral therapy, starting when he was 5. And then he finished out the school year at where he was at, but you had events like they went on a field trip to the nature reserve and they called me. I had to go pick him up because he was having a temper tantrum in the middle of the nature reserve because he had already been there before and this was boring for him. So he wasn't stimulated. But he's in kindergarten. So then they make me bring him home from the nature reserve and he's sobbing because he can't ride the bus home with his friends and he doesn't understand why. And, at that point, we just resolved ourselves to the fact that we're not going to get any help from the traditional school district. So we kept him in therapy over the summer, and we paid out of our pockets to have him diagnosed or have neuropsychological evaluations done and educational testing. Mm-hmm. And so when we got those results back, in the meantime, we were looking for another educational opportunity for him. Mm-hmm. And I want to say we got maybe like a flyer in the mail or something like that from the charter school that we ended up enrolling him in. And we researched it and we looked at their website, and it specifically said on their website they work with kids that are special needs. And so we thought that would maybe be a good place for him. And it was a school that was just beginning their elementary programs. So we were hoping it would be a smaller enrollment and maybe not as chaotic for him.
What was his diagnoses?
Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, general anxiety disorder, and separation anxiety disorders. And he also has a sound processing disorder.
But the sound processing didn't happen until later, right?
Well, they say it was kind of always there, but we didn't get to the addressing point of that until he was enrolled at the new charter school as part of his continuing treatment.
Okay.
So
you got the flyer and you started there.
Yeah, we started there.
What were your first impressions?
Or just reading about it and whatever information we can find about it. it seemed like it, would probably be a good place for him, reading about what type of programs they have. And he would have been able to go to the exact same school all the way through high school, which was something that we thought would be important to him, because if he can still see those same faces of teachers and that kind of thing every day, that's critical for him, because that separation of another teacher moving or leaving or anything like that it's a crippling thing for him.
The continuity.
That transition, and having to now begin to love somebody else, love another teacher the way he may have loved the other one. So we thought that was going to be the best opportunity for him. And we filled out the lottery application, and a couple weeks later they called us and told us that he had gotten a place. So immediately upon getting that notification, we emailed his diagnostic reports to the special education, I guess she might be the special education director. I'm not really sure what her title is. I just know she was supposed to run all that stuff as far as we knew. So we emailed it to her in July, way before school ever started. They had all the information about his diagnostics. She even called me on the phone, and I can remember when this happened because I had kidney stone and was at the Loveless emergency room downtown, and I remember getting up and walking outside and taking that phone call because it was important. And she reassured us that he, was going to be in the right spot, that they would be able to provide him what he needed. So he started the school year there that fall, and almost immediately was having behavior issues, temper tantrums, not doing his work, you name it. They were sending me messages immediately the first week of, how do we get him to sit still on the carpet? How do we, get him to not tap the pencil? Those are signs of ADHD. And so I would respond, we do these things in therapy, whatever. And it was constant. And his teacher he had at the beginning of the year, he had two teachers. One was a female, one was a male, and he was extremely attached to the male teacher. And the male teacher could get him to do things that maybe necessarily the female teacher could not, as far as adhering to the rules and that kind of thing. And so something happened, and this male teacher went away for a weekend or something and just didn't come back.
Yes.
And these students were told something that wasn't true. And they kept telling these students that he was coming back and he was coming back. And so when they finally had to tell our child that this teacher that he was in love with was not coming back, it shattered his world. He couldn't function.
Yep, I remember that.
And so then they brought in a new teacher's aide to help in the classroom. And she was only there for a short period of time for whatever reason. And he, with the anxiety issues that he has, he internalizes that, and he thinks that maybe he's the reason that caused that teacher to leave, or, whatever. And it would cause him to have further behavior issues. And I don't remember, I guess it was after he got suspended the first time that we, we're like, I don't know what. First off, they hit us with the suspension out of nowhere. We had no idea that he had, I don't even remember how many referrals.
Had you seen the referrals?
No, never saw a single one of them until they called and said he was being suspended.
Yeah.
I want to say 13 referrals at that point. And they called us and told us he was suspended, and we never saw a single one of them. Never once. And the precipitating issue was that he had to go down to the principal or the dean's office. And in the past, that had been used as a way to help him decompress and calm down in an alternative scenario. It had never, ever been explained to us that when he was going down there, they were behavioral issues. And so they called us and told us that they had had a conference about and that he was being suspended. On the day he got suspended, yeah, they called and told us that, well, it was the receptionist that called. And she calls and she says, I have bad news. Okay. She's like, yeah, suspended. He can't come back till Monday. Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Nobody from the administration had called me. So I'm like trying to get a hold of the teacher on the classroom app, find out what's going on. And apparently they had had a conference regarding my child, which I was not included in, and had determined that he should be suspended for whatever it was the infraction of the day was. So he was suspended till that following Monday, but what they didn't do was follow their own disciplinary procedures that they had posted for students, and they have a section...
Like a discipline matrix kind of thing?
Yes.
In the family handbook?
Yes, There is, in the student rights and responsibilities section of the handbook, and he didn't get that due process. There's a process for him and us on behalf of him, because he's our minor child, to plead his case or whatever you want to say, but they just arbitrarily suspended him with no... And he was not allowed to return back to school until we went and had a meeting that following Monday. But while they've got him suspended, now they call him in to do the academic testing that we had been requesting.
You were called in by the school to do the academic testing, and this was upon your initiation. You had sent a letter in saying that you would like that. And so the reason was because he had been medically diagnosed with ADHD.
Correct.
And anxiety.
Yes.
General anxiety.
And separation.
And separation anxiety. Okay, but he didn't have an IEP.
No, he did not.
Okay, so that should have been done within the first 30 days of school.
It was. They had the reports, his neuropsych reports.
No, I mean the IEP.
Yes, it should have.
Right.
When they got those reports from the neuropsych report saying, these are his issues, this is what he has, that's a qualifying event right there. Mm-hmm. You have the information, you can initiate it. And it wasn't done. We're talking about February now.
Okay. And so then you sent the letter in February.
Correct.
After school had already been going for half a year, more than half a year, asking for academic testing.
Yes.
And then, so you guys brought him in, and
while he was on suspension, and he, according to their rules and guidelines, he was not supposed to step foot anywhere on that campus, but it was convenient for them finally at that time to do the academic testing.
Because the deadline was up.
Yeah. Because now they've got the ball rolling on the guidelines regarding how many times somebody can be suspended and how many times, because now he's been suspended 3 days. So now they do have guidelines that what are they going to do with him? Because at 10 days, once he's suspended, that's the max he can be suspended. Now they've got to either pay to have him sent somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. That's if he has a special education IEP.
Well, either way, it should never have taken anywhere near the amount of time that it did.
Absolutely.
And
so what happened? What was the diagnosis? His gifted diagnosis?
Yes, he was diagnosed as gifted.
And that's when the whole the sensory processing started.
Yes, that's correct. So they did that academic testing, and I forget when it was actually done, but it had been done, and then once that was complete, we moved on to the next step or whatever in the process. We got a notice at one point, and I can't remember if it was the first time after the second time he was suspended, but either way, they sent us a notice about a SAT team meeting. No, okay, so...
That was before his IEP.
Okay, so somewhere in the realm of this stuff happening, I got another phone call and he was suspended again. So this time I went to the school with an attorney because, we didn't know what we were supposed to do. Well, I don't remember what precipitated him me having to go to the school. But that particular day, a family friend was picking him up. I wasn't picking him up. And so when the gentleman called me and told me I needed to come to the school, that we needed to discuss this right away, I told him, I will be there, but needs to go home with this family friend. So when I get to the school to meet with them with this dire emergency meeting we're supposed to have regarding the latest incident, I pull up and I'm parked outside the school and I notice my friend's van is there. Why is his van still there when they've been out of school for an hour? I get in that meeting, or I get inside the school with the attorney and find out that the principal, the board, the president of the board or whatever.
The board chair.
Yes, okay. Those two people have my child in a meeting with the family friend, telling this family friend that they're going to resolve this issue right now, that, I walked in there, had a jacket over his head, and he was sobbing. Because this man was calling him a bad kid, and that if he didn't get his behavior under control, he couldn't go to school there anymore. And our family friend told them 4 times that he was just there to pick him up. He didn't have any other than that. I was on my way. And they had my child sit in that meeting. He heard all these terrible things about himself. When I got in that meeting with the attorney, we made them make leave because he didn't have any business being there in the first place. And so they laid out whatever the latest issue was, and he was being suspended again, this time for, I don't remember, but whatever it was going to be I think it was 5 days. I think he was suspended a week, if I remember correctly. Whatever it was, I think they were getting close to the 10 mark. And in this meeting, the principal reiterated to me that she had a degree in psychology or whatever it is, and she knows how to work with students like this. And I got so angry in the meeting because the issues he was having were not things that he could help for the most part. Yeah, there was probably some defiance in there, and he's just being a 5 and 6-year-old that doesn't want to do his work. But majority of it, he could not help. And I finally got so angry in the meeting, I just screamed, "He has a mental health disorder. What do you want me to do?" And then, she was like, "Oh, we know you're trying, but you're not doing anything to help the situation. We take him to therapy. His therapist makes suggestions. We bring those suggestions to you, and you ignore them, or you say you tried them for a day or two, and then they don't work anymore." And it was like pulling teeth to try and get them to do an IEP. And during this time, I had a meltdown, and this happened at home, but he had a meltdown. And I ended up having to take him to Presbyterian, to the mental health facility. They sent him home that night. He was okay. He was fine. They made some suggestions, but they told me to take him to UNM the next day. So I took him to the UNM pediatric psychiatric emergency room area. And the first thing the doctor asked me was, what's the behaviors, what's been going on, So I told him everything, and the first thing the doctor said to me was, "Does he have an IEP in place?" I just started crying because we've been fighting them for so long to try and get it done. And here we are now at this point that I've had to bring my kid to a psychiatric emergency room to try and keep them from kicking him out of school when he had every right to be there.
Yes. So sorry. I'm so sorry. I had no idea that things were like that bad. I'm so sorry.
That doctor wrote a note that said that they needed to get him an IEP. And so I brought the note to the school, and it was shortly after that that they finally started moving in that direction. And I think they started and I can't remember the order, but there was supposed to have been a set team meeting, and I was supposed to have been included in that. And I show up to the meeting, and this was after the other meeting with the attorney present. So we show up to the meeting. No one's called to tell us it's canceled. We both took off work that morning. We show up to the meeting at the school, and the receptionist calls whoever the set team leader is or whatever. And she has her on speakerphone, and she tells them that we're here for that meeting. And the lady on the other end of the line said, "Oh, well, we've been directed. We're not supposed to speak to them at all." No one informed us that meeting was happening. Last time I checked, they've lost sight of what the important thing about this is, which is this little boy who's stuck in the middle of all of this. And we're supposed to have this big important meeting to try and come up with a plan, and we get there and you say you're not supposed to have any communication with us whatsoever. How are we?
Where do you go from there?
Yeah. What do we do? And the receptionist she was trying to scramble to pick up the phone real quick, like she didn't, want us to hear anything else that was being said, but we should have been a part of that meeting. They had it and we were not.
So you didn't sign any paperwork, because that's what happens in a SAT meeting. You're supposed to sign some paperwork.
If I did, I don't remember. But the actual meeting, SAT team meeting, we were not included in. We were told when we got to school that meeting had been canceled. And then when we showed up for the IEP, I asked about it. They said, "Oh, well, we had the meeting."
So, you didn't show up?
Yeah, that they never even informed us of when the meeting was going to be. They did it on their own. Originally, we had been asked to attend, and then when we showed up to attend the meeting, they told us that it wasn't happening. It had been canceled because they're not supposed to communicate with us, and that was the directive they were giving from higher up.
And so the question is, what can you possibly do from there?
Right.
You're sitting there, right, waiting. And they say they can't talk to you. Where are the directions that say what to do next?
Right.
So what were you able to do?
I can't remember. Shortly after that happened, we all sat down to do the IEP meeting. And I was not here. I was out of town in Santa Fe. But my husband came with our attorney, and then the school staff was there.
I think that was the one I was at.
That was the one you were at.
But I didn't realize all this other stuff had happened.
Yes. Okay. So this was the one you were at, and I only hear what happened from my husband, but he's one of those people that doesn't get angry, and he came out of that meeting unglued because it was going fine, and then they kept hammering and hammering and hammering on this child and his, the behaviors that were precipitating all of this. And finally, my husband just said, "Do you even want this student here?" Because prior to this, they had given us multiple times handwritten notes with names of twice exceptional schools that we should look at, and that there had been 3 other students that had attended this charter school but had some of the same issues that our son did, and they referred them out to those twice exceptional schools, and they really enjoyed it. They were trying to kick us out. They were trying to push us out and not do what they were supposed to do, but we weren't going to let that happen. He had every right to be there. When they had the first had the IEP meeting, things went fine for a while, and then the president of the board, or whoever he is, it seemed like you got the feeling that he did not want him there. He did not want him there as a student.
And he was at all the meetings?
No, just the first one. So I think you had gone to get the student a tray for lunch.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And you came back and the meeting had been canceled. They abruptly stopped it. They didn't give us any forewarning. They didn't give us any cause. They just said they would have to get with their legal counsel and come back and reschedule it. So we went back and talked with our counsel and an educational attorney that dealt with special education law, and it's never supposed to be about how the school feels about it or how we feel about it as parents. It is only about what is in the best interest of this child and ensuring that he can be successful in whatever way that has to happen. So we, after they abruptly canceled the meeting, we sent a letter telling them that we would be willing to continue the meeting, and we would not bring counsel as long as, I'm almost positive that we requested that that gentleman not attend. Sorry, I was looking for the...
I was going to say, that's when the BIP happened, right?
He had a BIP and an FBA. Both of those were done.
There, I see it. It's on this right there. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Wow. So, wow, this is a lot of documentation. This is like everything, right?
Yes.
That has to do with all of this. And I'm assuming that you would email and just basically email back everything that had occurred during that meeting, after every meeting. Basically emailing like, okay, what happened at this meeting was this.
Oh,
and then
no, I would just keep it as, when we realized we were starting to have problems, I just kept it.
A log?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I just saved everything. I guess working in the legal field, you learn that you put everything in writing. So
Yeah.
see, there's where they wrote down where he should go to twice exceptional programs. I mean, I saved everything.
Right.
I was trying to find the letter where we wrote to them and told them that we would be willing to have it. See, here's where they notified us of the SAT meeting, but then they had it without us. This is the one that canceled. This was the person on the phone who said we're not supposed to be speaking to them.
So then, I mean, like, I just keep thinking, like, what do you do? Like, how do you document that you were there for a meeting? And then if there was a SAT meeting, where's the paperwork?
Right.
Did you get any paperwork? From that?
Not that I know of.
Did you ask for his CUME file? Did you ask for everything in his file?
No, I haven't done that, but actually I will do that now that...
Yeah, you have a right to everything in his file. So...
Yeah, I really wanted to find that letter. I wish... So I'll keep looking for it. But in the meantime, they decided to finally do the IEP. So we had the IEP meeting. We started out doing it. It got shut down. We asked them to schedule it again, that we would be willing to attend without counsel. So we did that. We came back. We finally drafted an IEP.
So let's talk about that for a second. Why would you, after all of this and knowing that the school is not following the policies and laws that are in place, and why would you decide not to go without a lawyer, without an attorney?
Because it wasn't about us. It wasn't about how we felt about it, whether they were right or whether they were wrong. It was about getting it done and getting it in place, even if we just had it on paper, just to get it done so that he was protected. That's what it was about. And then if there was an issue afterwards, then we could resolve it at that point. But we had to get it done for him and make sure that he was protected. I didn't want to go to that meeting without counsel. Mm-hmm. But I had to do what was best for him.
And it's interesting because a lot of people don't understand that. They don't know when to bring a lawyer, when not to bring a lawyer.
Right.
Were you comfortable with what you came out of the meeting with?
I think so, and let me tell you why. Because there were two people in that meeting that we felt truly advocated and wanted there and saw him for more than the labels that they put on him. He wasn't a bad kid. He's really smart. He wears his heart on his sleeve. And they didn't see any of that. But these two people in that meeting, his social worker with the school, and you.
I was just one of 4 teachers, right? Just one of 4. And then there are elective teachers as well.
Yes.
So there was 2 more teachers?
You were there, and then the 2 primary teachers in the main classroom or whatever, they were there.
And so did you feel like it was a good IEP for him? Did you feel like everything was addressed? Because that's hard for parents to know, right? How are parents supposed to know whether they've got a good IEP?
We had an idea of what we thought he needed, and we had supporting documents from his neuropsych, the one that did the neuropsych evaluation. We had supporting documents from his therapist, and we had documentation from UNM that said he needed a behavioral support specialist, or BSM. We told the school, you've now had 3 separate people who work with this child say he needs a BSM. That should have been a service that school provided to him, and they refused. They rejected it as part of his plan, saying that he didn't need it. So they get the IEP in place. There's certain steps 1 through 5, that they're supposed to follow if he's having an issue or a meltdown.
That's the behavior intervention plan.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The very next week, I think it was the next week, I could be a little off on the time, but literally right after we had it done and in place, I get a phone call from the school. This has happened. This might have been the second time he had gotten suspended. But anyway, oh no, I remember what happened here. Okay, so they called me and had followed steps 1, 3, and something. But one of the things that they were supposed to do was send him to your room to decompress, because he was very attached to you. And they didn't do that.
I remember that.
And I sent them another letter. Why did we just sit down and do all of this, and you have these steps, they're supposed to go in this order to de-escalate him. Mm-hmm. Why weren't they followed? They had every excuse under the sun about why it wasn't done in that order. I was
teaching and I didn't need to be interrupted.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
But
I was very frustrated myself.
Those are protected.
Yes.
It's that way for a reason, and you're supposed to adhere to it. And right off the bat, you don't. You don't. But when we called them out on that right away, it seemed to kind of prod them in the direction that we're not messing around. We're not going to let you just walk all over us. We're not going to let you push him out. So for this incident, they wanted to suspend him, which would have put him at the max 10 days. So and now he has an IEP in place. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to suspend him, but when they're that young, they're 5 and 6, they don't understand what that means or why they're sitting at home all day. It's not a age appropriate discipline.
Right. It's zero tolerance.
Yes.
Punitive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we were like, look, we'll come and he can be in school suspension. Well, then they said they didn't have enough people to do in-school suspension, because that was an alternative that we mentioned. Then they said they didn't have enough staff to do in-school suspension. So I ended up going to school with him for 2 days and sitting with him in his classrooms in lieu of them suspending him homebound once again.
For him, he needed a calm down space, right?
Yes, a safe space.
Okay,
Yes.
so a safe space. And then, and then what were some of the other strategies that you all had come up with?
We used the token economy system.
That's right.
Which
Okay,
worked
now
very
I
well for him. And we provided the tokens, we provided all the prizes in the prize basket. I mean, we provided all of that stuff. And then he could take a break. He could meet with the social worker. He was supposed to get, X amount of counseling hours a week. And I know she met with him sometimes, but I don't know if he ever truly, really got what he was entitled to under his plan.
How would a parent know?
Yeah.
I mean,
We don't.
do they keep a log?
I don't know. And would I even be entitled to his records with the social worker?
Yes.
With his psychiatrist, I am not. Or his therapist, I am not.
I think, that's a really good question. I think because it is the school, it's your record. It's his record.
Yeah.
But I'm not completely sure.
I'm not either. I don't know, is it just like him meeting with a regular therapist, that's protected in some manner. So I don't know. I don't know. Did he really get those? What, they drafted the FBA after having the SAT team meeting, and we weren't included. You were there though, it says.
I was?
Yep.
I don't remember that. I have no idea.
Well, I'm sure you've probably done so many of these that it's hard to keep up.
No, that was kind of the beginning of my special education licensure program.
Yeah.
But I don't remember. So
And this was the data they used to, I believe, draft the. Yes, this was what they used to draft the SET.
okay, so
This and the SET plan, or whatever.
the SAT plan.
I don't have it. This is what they gave me, and this is because I asked specifically for it because they told me they had kept a log. Well, where's your log? I've never seen it.
And are these all just, who's this? Is this all in math?
This is his regular classroom.
Okay, that would be math, yeah. So, I know that I had some I had some notes. So I did a whole ticket system, I don't know if that was it seemed like it was working for him.
Yes, no, it did. It was beneficial for him. But like I said, we earlier when I mentioned we had gone to participate in this SET team meeting and the drafting of the behavioral plans, and they did it all without us.
That is so weird, and I don't remember that at all. In fact, I may not even have known what exactly
I'm sure
supposed to be happening, actually. I've learned a
okay.
lot over the last few years. and that to me, that says a lot too about the way that we're preparing teachers. Because
Yes.
I have an early childhood degree. I have a bachelor's degree in K through 8 elementary. Mm-hmm. And then taking these classes, I had to take 4 classes for my special education licensure, and I learned so much in those classes. But you can't completely prepare teachers at the beginning, and in college, because it's all based on different needs of different children.
Right, everybody is different. Every one of them learns different. They all have, you're right, it's different needs, and you have to be prepared to, if you're a school and you're running a school and you're receiving funding from the federal government and from the state to provide services, you should know what you're doing.
Right. I know I'm a little nervous about even being a principal because I don't know that I know enough, yet for that, if I even go down that road. But so he had the IEP, and then let's see, and then the BIP.
So those were implemented, and that was in
Oh, you
first
were telling
grade.
me about where the when he was getting suspended, it would have gotten to the max.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Then, like you mentioned earlier, now we had an IEP in place at this point. And so we had to get prepared because we thought the feeling that we got was that they were trying to push him out. And now he's at that 10-day mark. So now they can, I forget what the process is called. I have it somewhere.
the due process or manifestation
Yes,
determination?
manifestation determination. We really got the feeling that that was the direction that they were going, despite the fact that we had this stuff in place. So we had to start doing some research on our own to figure out what was that process, what is it like, what can we expect, because you can see that the IEP and stuff was drafted in, like, I want to say April, and this stuff was printed on May 2nd of 2016. So another incident had happened, and then we started having to look for manifestation determination and find out what his rights were and what our rights were and whether or not ADHD was a protected item.
It's an other health impairment rather than
Yes,
and rather than a disability.
yes.
And so are any of his, I think his sensory processing disorder is, that's a disability, right? Or is it not?
I'm not sure. They didn't code it as a disability as far as drafting any of this goes, and they were aware of it. So I don't know if it qualified or not. So he struggled throughout the school year, but once the IEP was in place after that second incident where they didn't follow the plan, they seemed to kind of get it together and seem to be following it like they were supposed to, and he had a good rest of that year, and then he had a good next year.
But what about the manifestation determination?
They-
Did you guys ever have to do that?
No, we didn't,
But you had started researching
we
it
were
already.
prepared because we thought that that was the direction that they were going. I mean, they wrote on scraps of paper different schools to send him to because he was both behavior and gifted. You know, what do you think that makes us feel like? You're telling us you don't want him here by writing these things down on a sheet of paper and handing it to his parents. And telling us on more than one occasion that other students had gone to those schools and really liked it.
So being devil's advocate, what if it was like, we really, really do want him to be successful, and therefore, this might be a better fit, right?
I could
would you say to that?
I could see that if we were able to get supporting opinions from his physicians that were treating him, from his therapist, and none of them said he needed to be in a school like that. Every one of them said no, absolutely not. There's no reason for him to be there.
What kind of school was it?
The twice exceptional schools.
I've never heard of twice exceptional schools here in Albuquerque.
Yeah, she gave me the name of 3 of them.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes, they are programs for students who are not only gifted or intelligent, but also may have behavioral issues. Yep. And
It's in one of these, I think.
yeah, like I said, she wrote it. Yeah, there's 3.
Okay.
And these are
Okay, see 'em?
the main public school systems.
I mean, the district.
Yes, the district.
I did not know that. Yeah. But regardless, what were your thoughts were he has a right to be here?
Absolutely.
And
You're trying to push him out because clearly you don't want him here, and you couldn't even answer the question during the IEP session with my husband and our attorney, when we specifically asked you, do you want him here? And you didn't respond. And then we said, what are you going to do with all the other children like him that come through here? Push them all out? Because that's what's happening. That's what you're trying to do. Yes, you were not at the
I was the case manager, and I was the IEP case manager, and I was not even invited to that meeting?
I have a feeling why they didn't want you there. Just our own opinion. My husband and I, our opinion that you advocate for him. You wanted him there. You knew he could be successful there. And I have a feeling that's why you weren't in the second one.
So for people who maybe don't understand, when you say he has a right to be there,
federal and state law protect him. He is protected under those regulations, and he had every right to be there, as opposed to every other student who maybe doesn't have ADHD or, whatever, other health impairment. Just like a kid that was in a wheelchair or severely mentally challenged, they have every right to be here just as much as any of these other students.
At every school in New Mexico, at every public school in New Mexico, every child that has a disability is allowed to be at that school, at any school.
As far as I understand it, there was nothing barring him from attending. They advertised on their website that they were good for special education students, and he gets there and it's a fight tooth and nail to get him the services that he needs.
What was the next year like?
Next year
for you guys, what do you remember about the next year?
It was a big relief because he had these protections in place, and the school seemed to be adhering to it. He was successful. He was getting his work done. Once they put these tools in place, except for that one issue when they didn't adhere to the FBA, he was successful. He excelled. He did great. He had an outstanding year. Not a single disciplinary issue that we were ever made aware of. That doesn't mean there might not be 40 referrals sitting somewhere that we were never told about. But as far as we know, he had a great.
You guys were also working with a therapist.
Yes. Yes, we did.
That was that was a big commitment for you all, right?
Yes, we.
It was like 30 sessions or something.
Yeah, it was a long time. We took him. Well, the school said they could probably provide OT for him. But then they made the caveat, well, he might not get as good quality of service. Well, as a parent, why am I going to send him to your OT and he's going to get crappy service when I can bring him to an outside OT and he can get the service he deserves? I mean, what does that say for any other parent who doesn't have that as a luxury? Because there's a lot of them that don't. And
my thought is that maybe the school is required to make sure that an occupational therapist is doing a good job. Right?
I would assume so.
If they're hiring them.
Yeah, I would think so. Absolutely, I would think so. But yeah, he went to occupational therapy every week. And I want to say it was for like 9 months, 6 months, 9 months, something like that. But he graduated occupational therapy and it was a big help for him. But they never gave us a problem about that. And I have a feeling it's because they weren't having to pay for the occupational therapy. And I could just be jaded because of everything that's happened.
So essentially, if a student is counted as a student with special needs at the school, then there's funding that's being provided.
That is true. That's the way I understand it.
So whatever, and then it's also added, there's more added on top of that depending on what the disabilities are and what the therapist and the needs are. Mm-hmm. So he was diagnosed as needing this therapy.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I think when it's not put in the IEP as being given, then they wouldn't be given the money for it. But why wouldn't, I mean, so many schools are struggling, for the money.
Right.
They want the money. So why do you think maybe that?
I don't really know. I just know what we feel. And again, like I said, it could just be that we feel so wronged by the whole situation. And had not had such separation issues, we would have moved him out of the charter school too, to ensure that he was in the right spot. But
where would you go?
Where would we go? What's to say that he's not going to go somewhere else because the next school doesn't know what the heck they're doing, or it's a fight because it takes an act of Congress to get the IEP in place, and in the meantime they're constantly in trouble, on their disciplinary record. And then with that, they told us, because in first grade he had all the issues, and they told us that if he did really good, they'd wipe out his disciplinary record. To me, that sounds like a bribe. When they mentioned the exceptional schools, that they would send him with a clean slate. So you want to push us out and send us to these exceptional schools, and then you're going to give him a behavioral clean slate?
Right.
To get rid of him.
Okay.
So he can go there.
But yet the reason why that he's supposed to be
going there is because he has
behavioral issues. So
yes.
So wiping the clean slate would send him to a new school that wouldn't have any idea what was going on, except for that he has an IEP with a
right.
FBA, functional behavior assessment, and a BIP,
right.
behavior intervention plan. Okay. Well, it's interesting. So, I mean, a lot of charter schools are getting grants from outside resources, outside funds.
Yes.
And so some of the schools are telling the public education department, we don't care about your money. We don't want your money for children with special needs. And we don't want them here. And because unfortunately the law, the way it's written, it's really sad, but it actually does say schools who receive funding for special education have to do this and have to do this and have to do this. It's like, so they're like, well, I don't have to, just we won't take the funding, and therefore we aren't bound by any of these laws. So do you think that there were some strategies in place that helped your son, and did any of those? Because knowing him personally, he is an emotional person, and he does need to learn how to, he did need to learn how to think about how he's feeling, and what to do next, and where did he get that? Because, I watched him go through these, years and change, and I was so impressed. I mean, he was in a class that was
I observed it on a number of occasions.
Out of control.
It absolutely
on a
was
number
out
of
of control.
occasions. Pretty much all the time.
They knew I was coming to observe, and when I came to observe, it was crazy. I was shocked. I do not know how any of those students got any work done, because,
a lot of them left.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were very far behind. Not all of them. There's some really higher proficiency students in there. But
it was just
But he
chaotic.
Was unbelievably calm. I think one time, he yelled, but he was trying to say, quiet, because I need to say something.
Yeah.
And then he would stop and he'd take his breaths, and I just thought, wow, he has come so far.
A lot. I have to give him credit, because he's worked his bottom off from the time he was 4 years old into where he is now, is just leaps and bounds. He had an exceptional therapist, and they worked together. They were a team. He still stays in contact with her. We send her pictures. She gave us input on a situation that had come about in our family this year, and he hasn't seen her since we relocated. So she's still very much a part of his life. But because of the work that the two of them did together, he really was able to learn those coping skills. And that's not to say that every day he's like unicorns and rainbows, but mostly he's able to control that.
And does he have that continuation at his school now,
Yes.
where he's at? They have that kind of system in place
Yes.
for him.
Yes.
What is it that they're doing that's continuing to help support him along?
So when we relocated from New Mexico to Texas, and that's where we reside now. So he's been in school in Texas for a year. This is going into his second year. They switched him from special education under an IEP to a 504. And so he is functioning now under a 504 plan. But very many of the same elements that we put into his IEP transferred over into his 504, but they, it was almost like a graduation for him. He didn't need to be at this level anymore, that he could be at this level, and that was a huge achievement for him. And, that's not to say that, we don't have our struggles. It's hard to get him to do homework, and, because he went to a school that didn't have homework.
Oh, that's right.
So transitioning to a school that has homework has been a nightmare. Knockdown, drag out fight, and it's definitely not been easy for him, but he's getting there. And so we talked to his teachers, let him know the struggles he's having with his homework, and they said, okay, great. If the packet seems overwhelming, because they give it to you on Monday and you have like a week to do it. So if that seems overwhelming, let's put it on Google. They put it on Google Classroom, and he'll sit down and he'll do it. And
so all it took was just putting it on the computer. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so they're very, very much in constant communication. We are having this issue and this issue. Like recently, he was being very overwhelmed by the writing process. So they tried some different strategies, and we're still having some issues. He was still shutting down. So I told her, try this. We try this at home. See, because if he's doing the same thing at home and he's doing it at school, that's structure for him. That's consistency for him, right? So she tried it the next day, and he's been successful with it. He doesn't feel as overwhelmed by the writing process and can get through that work. But when we moved to Texas, we specifically chose a town that was smaller and had a smaller school district so that he would not get lost in the shuffle, and that he would still be able to get the services he needs, and would be able to, see all the same teachers all the time. And even when he moves up a grade level, because the elementary, middle school, and high school are all on
the campus.
Yeah, it's all one area. And so he's really, he's very much thrived in that environment.
What would you advise parents to do if they found themselves in any kind of, similar situation as you and your husband and your son were? Because I watched your pain.
Yeah.
I watched the sadness, and apparently I didn't understand what all was going on, but I know I could see that you all were being torn up.
Yes, it was a hard situation, and he luckily has come out on the other side of it. And so that way we know that what we did and what we fought for, and not letting them bully us around was worth it, because otherwise he'd still be in the same situation he was in 2 years ago. I would say research, write everything down, put everything in writing. So every communication that you have with your administrators at your child's school or whoever, put it all in writing. If you're sending a letter to the school, send it certified mail so they have to sign for it, and you can get a return receipt, and then they can't say they didn't get it when you send it by email. Or, document everything. Document. Because that's what's going to save you in the end. That's what's going to be able to prove that what they're doing is not right, or what you need for them to do is all right here, and they can't deny it. They can't come back and say, well, that never happened. It's all right here. You have everything. And if you feel like you're being pushed around by the school or anything like that, get an advocate, whether it be an attorney that specializes in education law or an advocate through, legal aid somewhere that can go with you and help you get through that process so that you can ensure that your child's rights are being protected and not being trampled on, whether that be if they need an IEP or if they're going to be required to be held back because they didn't read proficiently, or whatever the situation may be, to make sure that, you have to become their voice and you have to push for what you know is right, despite whatever they may tell you and that you're wrong. You just have to know that it's not easy. It's a painful situation, but what you fight for is worth it in the end.
Because you never know what might happen at the next school.
Absolutely.
That would be the same process all over again.
Yes.
And, the trauma that people go through, it's real.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what about teachers? What could you tell to teachers if they were in a situation, that's similar?
I would have to say, stay in communication with the parents. Let the parents know what you're seeing. If I message you and say, hey, my child has therapy on Saturday with his therapist, what should we address with them? And you don't respond? How can we be a team? I don't expect my child to go to school and you be a daycare provider all day, because that's not what your job is.
Right.
Your job is to work with their parents and the student to be as successful as they can possibly be.
Academically and behaviorally.
Yes. And if that requires special assistance, then that's what it requires.
I think a lot of times educators, we get, before and listening to other people, just that separation, like, well, we're here to teach.
Right.
Academics. But there is that whole behavioral component,
Right. Right. And you have to look at, I think, as an educator, and as I'm a certified victim advocate. And so when you see what is happening in our society, growing up as a child now is not like growing up as a child when I was younger, at least, because you're faced with so much more poverty and hunger and, socioeconomic backgrounds of all different sorts. But many, especially in this state, are poor. And you have to be able to teach the whole student. And you're right, not just academically, like their entire being. And that may include nutrition and, whatever, because, as a teacher, I would think, you never know how important you are to that child. What if you were that one bright spot in that kid's day every day? And the important things that they need to know in this life, they're having to learn it from you. And so if you can teach their whole being, social and, whatever it may be, I think, maybe we would have, I don't want to say more success, because I think there are a huge amount of successes that happen every day for these students. But I think that there's a lot more that we can be doing, or a lot more education that needs to happen for the teachers that are working with these students that face, whatever they may be facing, because it's different now than it was. Not to say that those things didn't occur then, but I think it's more prevalent now.
Mm-hmm.
And
especially in New Mexico.
Yes, absolutely. And those things can really affect a student's academics. If they're trying to concentrate on their work and they're hungry, they're not gonna be successful, because they're worried about, whether or not they're gonna be able to eat, or, what shoes they might have on, or, whatever it may be. I don't know. I think there's a lot of work to be done on all levels. I mean, across the board. We moved to Texas before started third grade. And part of the reason for that was because not only did my husband get transferred, but we had considered it because the education system doesn't seem, and not that it, every state has their issues, but it seems that New Mexico has a lot of issues that needed to be addressed, and we weren't sure what that might be for his future just based on the past that he had since we lived here and he started school here.
So you essentially had to leave because you were trying to get him a better education.
I would say that was absolutely a component to it. Like where he was at, he was supposedly getting gifted work in his classroom. I never saw any of it. Where he's at now, he goes to an actual gifted classroom, I think 3 times a week, and they do, you name it, science projects and build pulleys and levees and, things that are feeding what he needs. And he needed that because
that's how his mind works.
Yes, absolutely. They're very much working toward teaching the individual child and not necessarily teaching in a blanket manner. And I think, part of that could be that we're in a smaller district, specifically for that purpose. I don't know that he would have the same necessarily because if we went to a larger district, because then he might get lost in the shuffle. So there was a lot of things to consider, but I would.
So what are we going to do about transparency and accountability here in New Mexico? I think that's like the underlying biggest issue, right?
Yes.
What can we do to fix this?
Part of the problem, I think, is that
you're in the legal field.
Right. If you don't know where to look for what your rights are or what your child's rights are, you're not going to find it, or at least if you make it to the website, good luck figuring out what it means. I think it would be really helpful for schools to have somebody in place or somebody, maybe that would be the special education person over it. I don't really know, but somebody in place that can educate these parents. They have a meeting at the beginning of the year that talks about all of how the school year is going to go, what they require them to wear, whatever. Why can't they have a meeting that talks about if you think your child might have, need special education, this is the process that you go through, this is your contact. Why can't they do that?
So you're saying like basically an education advocate right there in the school that can handle general special education, anything that a parent might need to know. Like how do you test this? How does this test work? How does the testing work? What happens next year?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be incredibly beneficial because, like I said, if you don't know what you're looking for or know even where to begin, it's gonna be a struggle to find it. It's definitely not easy. And then trying to figure out what exactly are your rights, which ones apply to my situation, which ones don't. That's hard to decipher too. So having an education advocate on campus would be a huge benefit to not only the parents that are trying to navigate the system, but these students, which sometimes it's lost sight that that's what it's about, especially in my situation. I think it was lost sight that it wasn't about the behaviors or the procedure or anything like that. It was supposed to be about him and what can we do as a team to make him his best. Eventually we got there, but it was a long road to get there. And I think having somebody at the school that could have said, you should look at this, this, and this, or whatever, would be beneficial to a lot of these other parents that don't know where to look, that don't know what their rights are.
I think you guys are amazing. I've honestly never seen anybody go through what you did and come out of it successfully. So that's saying something. So yeah, you can tell because he's a great kid and You guys are doing
He
such a good
is,
job.
and it was trying to get them to see that that's what he is. He's not the behaviors. He's not the label you're putting on him. He's intelligent. He's kind. He's giving to other students. But they weren't seeing any of that. They were only seeing what was negative.
So they weren't seeing the positive marks he was getting on all the behavior stuff.
Yes.
They probably weren't seeing that.
I think they were completely blind to that.
Just looking at the negative.
Yeah. At least, as a parent, that's the way it felt for us, was that they were ignoring all these other things that he may do really well and only focusing on whatever these items were. But once we finally got the IEP in place and they started adhering to it and the behavioral plan, like now he doesn't even have a BIP. He just has his 504. He doesn't have anything else. And he's doing amazing.
And they just follow.
Sure do. But it was getting that in place and following it so he had the tools that he needed in order to be able to be his best self. And once they did that, he didn't have any more issues. But why did it take us from July, when I provided them the original testing, until April when the IEP was initiated or finalized? Why did it take that long?
It's like taking it all the way back. There are all these policies and laws in place if they were just being followed.
Right, and they're not. And this is a clear example that it was not followed. And it took the threat of having, we spoke to one attorney who is very prominent here in Albuquerque, not the one that we came to the meetings with, but another one. She specifically does special education law. And the school that we're speaking about, she told us she's had multiple cases involving them for the same issues, not following the guidelines that the laws require with regard to special education.
So why is this school an A school?
I don't understand that.
Why is
wanna
the school
know.
receiving so much money
And that's another thing,
to be replicating into another
right,
school?
to be replicating. And then if they're getting money, another thing I just recently read about New Mexico is that charter schools are getting a ton of money, but they're using previous year's numbers for the number of students. And so they might get, $10 million for the coming school year, but they're basing it off of last year's numbers. And so they're being paid for students that they don't even have there.
It's just so important that we communicate. That's the other thing. I just think it's that, like you were saying, parents, teachers, but even as community members,
Yes.
we need to communicate and we need to be able to work together. And, there's just, people feel, did you feel embarrassed?
Yes.
Did you feel afraid to talk, to
Yes.
do things?
Very much so.
You really didn't tell me what was going on.
Yeah, very much so.
I don't know. Do you feel like it was you were afraid of further retaliation?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because we felt like, well, if we say what we really feel or whatever, are they just going to kick him out? And then we would have to fight to get him back there, but then would it be worth it? And they made it clear, and had it not been for you and the social worker, we would not have sent him back that next year. But we felt like with you guys in place that you would look out for him.
Right. I hear what you're saying. So having him go to a new school, you didn't know if he would have anybody there.
Right.
That would be.
He would be starting over again.
Right. Plus the separation.
Yes.
So. Right.
Very much so, because I don't know if you remember how bad it was when the male teacher left.
Yes,
and he
I do.
wore that thing on his arm with
Brilliant.
the picture. Yeah.
Figuring out what works, right? And that was what worked. Having that picture of the previous teacher. Right.
It had, because he separation anxiety, so it had a picture of the three of us. Our family and our pets, because he very much missed his pets during the day, and the teacher. And that helped him a lot. Another thing was earphones. I don't know how many pairs of
Yes.
soundproof earphones we bought and sent up to the school, and every one of them was lost. Someone else would use them, and then they weren't there for him when he needed them. And we even donated extra pairs so other students could utilize those same things, so that he wasn't necessarily the only one. And just because another student doesn't have an IEP in place doesn't mean that same modality won't help them.
Right.
So, and we do the same thing at his school now. We just sent a bunch of stress balls and earphones. And then they have these bands that go on their chair so they can fidget at their feet, but not
like bounce their feet.
Yeah, but not on the desk. And so we've absolutely donated all of that stuff in order to not only be successful, but any of these other kids, because we've been there. We know what that was like, and don't want to go back there.
I know this was hard for you to talk about, but I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you're willing to share this story, because we need to make sure people understand what's happening. Like you were just saying, I mean, it was fear, and shame or I'm not sure exactly, was it fear?
Fear, shame, all of those things. Felt all of it.
And that kind of kept it bottled inside. And thank you so much for being willing to talk about this, because it's really important that we educate people about what's going on so that we can have the conversation to change things.
Absolutely. Like I've told you before, we may not live here anymore, but that doesn't mean we're not going to keep fighting for those kids in this state, because they deserve more than they're getting now.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing
Absolutely.
that. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.